In 1922, archaeologists cracked open a sealed tomb that had been untouched for 3,300 years. Inside, they found gold. They found treasure. They found a teenage king wrapped in linen. And they found something nobody expected: a body that refused to tell a clean story. His name was Tutankhamun. He ruled Egypt at 9 years old. He was dead by 19. For a century, the world assumed he was murdered. A palace conspiracy, a poisoned cup, a blow to the skull in the dark. Then, forensic science got involved. And what it found was stranger than any assassination theory. This is the forensic file on the boy who became a god, and the death that still has no verdict. Welcome back to The Bone Verdict. I'm your forensic narrator, and this channel exists for one reason: to take history's most contested deaths and run them through the evidence. Not legend, not politics, evidence. Today's case: Egypt, approximately 1323 BCE. The pharaoh Tutankhamun, son of the heretic king Akhenaten, dies suddenly, with no named heir, no clear cause, and no explanation that survives scrutiny. Over the next 100 years of modern investigation, his mummy will be X-rayed, CT scanned, DNA tested, and subjected to forensic analysis that would make any crime lab proud. The results will contradict each other, repeatedly. Let's go through this file, piece by piece. November 4th, 1922. Howard Carter's team uncovers a stone step in the Valley of the Kings. 16 steps later, they're standing in front of a sealed door, the wax impressions of the royal necropolis still intact after 33 centuries. Carter writes in his diary, "I was struck dumb with amazement." The tomb of Tutankhamun, designation KV62, was the most intact royal burial ever found in Egypt. 4 chambers, over 5,000 objects, chariots, thrones, weapons, wine jars, game boards, a golden death mask weighing 11 kilograms. And at the center of it all, 3 nested coffins, the innermost made of solid gold, containing the mummified body of a king who died young and was buried in a hurry. That last part, buried in a hurry, would become forensically significant. 3 years after discovery, anatomist Douglas Derry performs the first physical examination of the mummy and immediately runs into problems. The mummy is in poor condition. The resin used in mummification has essentially glued the body to the innermost coffin. To remove it, Carter's team has to cut the body apart, separating the torso from the legs, the head from the neck. This decision will haunt every forensic investigation for the next century. What Derry finds: a young male, approximately 18 to 20 years old. Short, around 167 centimeters. Physically unimpressive for a pharaoh. Muscle development consistent with limited physical activity. The teeth tell their own story. Derry notes the wisdom teeth are partially erupted, a reliable marker of age. This king was not yet fully grown when he died. And something else. Inside the wrappings around the skull, 2 loose bone fragments, small chips of bone floating in the cranial cavity, visible only when the head is turned. Derry notes them, files them, moves on. Nobody asks the obvious question for 43 years. 1968. A team from the University of Liverpool gets permission to X-ray the mummy. Professor R.G. Harrison leads the study. The equipment is basic by modern standards. Portable X-ray machines hauled into the Cairo Museum. But what they find stops everyone cold. The two bone fragments Derry noted in 1925 are still there, and under X-ray, they appear to be at the base of the skull. Harrison's team proposes a theory. Tutankhamun was struck from behind, a blow to the head, a blunt instrument, murder in the palace. The suspects line up almost immediately. I, the elderly advisor who became pharaoh after Tutankhamun's death. Horemheb, the military commander who would rule after I. The men who had the most to gain from a young king's sudden death. For 3 decades, this theory dominates. Tutankhamun murdered. Case seemingly closed. Then 2005 arrives. The CT scan, 2005. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities commissions the most thorough examination of Tutankhamun's remains ever attempted. A team of 17 scientists, a mobile CT scanner, 1,700 cross-sectional images of the mummy captured in 15 minutes. The lead forensic analyst is Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's most prominent archaeologist. The project is international, rigorous, and fully documented. What they find demolishes the murder theory. The bone fragments in the skull? Not from a pre-mortem blow. The CT scans show the fragments are consistent with post-mortem damage, most likely caused during the mummification process itself, or during Howard Carter's 1925 handling of the body. There is no evidence of a fatal skull fracture, no hemorrhage patterns consistent with a pre-death blow, no compression injuries to the cranium. The murder theory, built on 40 years of assumptions, collapses. But that just opens the question wider. If he wasn't murdered, what killed him? The 2005 CT data reveals something unexpected about Tutankhamun's physical condition. His skeleton shows signs of bone disease in his left foot, specifically avascular necrosis, a condition where bone tissue dies due to interrupted blood supply. He had Kohler disease, a rare condition affecting the tarsal bones. Painful, degenerative, progressive. In severe cases, the affected bones can collapse entirely under body weight. The archaeological record suddenly makes sense. 130 walking canes were found in his tomb. 130 for a teenage king. Forensic analysis of the canes shows significant wear patterns on the handles and tips. They weren't ceremonial. They were used daily. Researchers also found gloves with reinforced fingers, consistent with someone who needed to grip a cane tightly for extended periods. Tutankhamun walked with a limp, possibly severe. He may have required assistance to move across the polished stone floors of his own palace. A physically compromised king, a teenage ruler surrounded by powerful advisors with their own ambitions. A young man who could not lead armies or appear invincible before his subjects. The political implications are significant, but the foot disease alone doesn't explain death at 19. 2010, the most ambitious forensic project in Egyptology history. Dr. Hawass leads a team that DNA tests 11 royal mummies from Tutankhamun's family line, attempting to reconstruct his parentage and identify hereditary disease. The results, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, are extraordinary. First, parentage. Tutankhamun's father is confirmed as KV55, the mummy believed to be Akhenaten. His mother is KV35YL, a mummy labeled the Younger Lady, believed to be one of Akhenaten's sisters, which means Tutankhamun was the product of a sibling marriage. Royal incest was politically common in ancient Egypt. It kept power within the bloodline, but the genetic consequences compound over generations. Each inbred generation concentrates recessive mutations that would otherwise remain dormant. The DNA analysis identifies multiple genetic disorders, including a club foot on his right side, in addition to the Kohler disease on his left. He had a cleft palate. He showed markers consistent with connective tissue disorders. He also had scoliosis, curvature of the spine. Forensic reconstructions suggest his posture would have been noticeably abnormal, contributing further to his need for walking support. His body was fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. And then the team finds something else in the DNA, something that shifts the entire theory of his death. 4 strains of Plasmodium falciparum, the parasite that causes malaria, are detected in Tutankhamun's DNA. Not 1, 4. Plasmodium falciparum is the most lethal form of malaria. Modern statistics: it kills over 600,000 people annually, even with available treatment. In 1323 BCE, no quinine, no artemisinin, no intravenous fluids, no intensive care. The 2010 study proposes a composite cause of death: Tutankhamun's genetically compromised immune system, already taxed by multiple inherited disorders, was overwhelmed by a severe malarial infection. The bone disease in his foot may have caused an additional complication. Avascular necrosis can lead to spontaneous fractures. A fracture in a malaria patient with a compromised immune system could trigger fatal septic shock. Dr. Hawass's conclusion: Tutankhamun died from a combination of malaria and complications from his bone disease. Not murder, not a conspiracy. Biology. The palace intrigue crowd was not satisfied. 2013 to 2016. Forensic science doesn't always speak with one voice. And with Tutankhamun, new investigators kept arriving with new tools. 2013. Researchers reanalyzed the original X-ray data, arguing the skull fracture evidence was dismissed too quickly. 2016. A forensic team produces a new analysis of trauma patterns on the mummy. Their finding: a significant injury to Tutankhamun's left knee, a massive wound, far beyond what bone disease alone could explain. The injury appears consistent with a high-speed impact, a chariot accident perhaps, or something more deliberate. Around the same time, Dr. Chris Naughton and a team of Egyptologists commission a virtual autopsy, using all existing CT data to model the body's injuries digitally. They conclude the mummy shows evidence of a catastrophic compression injury to the chest, ribs and sternum destroyed, heart potentially missing from the mummification. Their theory: Tutankhamun was struck by a moving chariot. Either an accident during a hunt or battle, or a staged attack made to look like one. The malaria explanation and the trauma explanation, both forensically supported, neither definitive. The hasty burial evidence. Here's something the forensic files don't always emphasize, but should. Tutankhamun's tomb is too small for a pharaoh. Egyptian royal tombs were carved and decorated over decades, typically beginning the moment a king took power. KV 62, by the standards of royal burials, is cramped, irregular, and shows signs of rushed decoration. The walls in the burial chamber were painted while still wet. The paint bled and smeared in places. That doesn't happen when artists have time to work. His burial goods, while spectacular in number, include items clearly repurposed from other royals. Jewelry with other names scratched out and replaced. A golden mask with cartouches that don't match the style of the rest of the tomb. Archaeologists also found black mold spots on the tomb walls, dried organic matter from rushed floral offerings placed before the paint had cured. The mold is still visible today, 3,000 years later. Somebody buried this king faster than any pharaoh should have been buried. A sudden, unexpected death at 19 would explain everything. A long illness would have allowed preparation. A sudden death would not. Whether that sudden death was disease, accident, or something more intentional, the burial itself confirms one thing without ambiguity. Nobody saw it coming. In 2022, the centenary of the tomb's discovery, a new study from researchers at the University of Turin reinvestigated the mummy's fracture patterns using updated digital modeling. Their conclusion adds another layer. Many of the injuries previously attributed to post-mortem damage may in fact be real ante-mortem trauma. A chariot impact remains the most forensically consistent explanation for the overall injury pattern. But the malaria data is also real. The bone disease is real. The genetic load is real. The most honest forensic conclusion, looking at the complete file, Tutankhamun was a physically compromised young man, the product of royal inbreeding, carrying multiple genetic disorders, walking on diseased bones. He lived in a politically volatile court where powerful men surrounded a weak king. He died suddenly. The burial suggests no one had time to prepare. Whether the final mechanism was a malarial fever, a chariot accident, a deliberate attack, or some combination of all three, the forensic record cannot yet say with certainty. The bone fragments are still there, in a museum in Cairo. Still not answering the question. One detail from this case still stays with me. 130 walking canes in the tomb of a teenage king. Someone put them there deliberately. Someone who knew he needed them. Someone who expected him to walk again in whatever comes after this life. Was that person grieving or relieved? Tell me in the comments, do you think Tutankhamun was murdered, or did his body simply give out? I want to hear your verdict. Case closed. I'll see you in the next file.